Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. My guest today is Gerry Gavin. He is an angelic communicator and an author. Welcome, Gerry.
Hi, Natasha. Thank you for having me.
So I loved saying that, an angelic communicator, but what is an angelic communicator?
An angelic communicator is basically someone who does speak directly with angels, or in my case, I communicate with an angel by the name of Margaret, who has identified herself to me as my guardian, and also as an angel who works with people in trying to help to communicate the truth of what is going to be happening in the future and how people can lead a happier life.
This is all good. Now the question is, so, you know, some people will hear that and go, yeah, right, or, you know, have some questions about that. So how did this happen for you? Is this something that all your life you had this kind of experience or connection to angels? Or?
No, not at all. I would have definitely been one of those people who would have said, yeah, right, and felt exactly the same way. I started off completely as a skeptic in terms of anything supernatural, anything that might happen like this. I mean, I grew up believing in angels. You know, I had grown up, that was just a part of my family's belief system, but it really wasn't until around 1990 that any of this started to have an effect on me. My girlfriend and I moved into a house at that time that she had just purchased, and found out a couple of months into the process of living there that the house was very, very haunted. And that process of trying to learn about what was going on with the house spiritually and everything else that was going on was what led me into...
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you. So I like details.
Sure.
So the house was haunted. How did you know it was haunted?
So many things that happened. There were actually visual apparitions that you could see, a mist that would float down the stairs, rooms that in the summertime without air conditioning were 30 degrees colder than the room next door. We were kind of starting to feel physically ill in the house as well.
Wow.
And it just was a really, it was literally one of those things that you see in movies and you kind of say, wow, that's just all make-believe. And when it was happening, it was just very, very real. And so we had to kind of learn about what was happening and learn
Instead of moving.
Instead of moving. Well, if it was a rental, we would have been out of there. But the house was just bought, so we were trying to figure out, you know, what to do to reclaim our home.
Yes.
We learned about that. We learned how to take care of that situation and to clear the energy. And trust me, when that was over, that was the last thing I ever wanted to have to do with anything spiritual. And it was a few years after that I decided to go to massage school. Again, very down-to-earth, very practical person. It was all about just a secondary income. And wound up going to school with a woman who had studied with Latin American shamans who were indigenous healers and Native American shamans. And as she would share a little bit about those things, I just gravitated towards it. I wanted to learn more, and I kept having really deep experiences. But the interesting thing was that I started to learn about, you know, communicating with spirit guides, with helping people to find out how they could identify what was wrong in their bodies and how they were spiritually drained. But it was a couple of years later that I actually wound up communicating with angels. And it was really, I considered it almost an accident at that point. I was just at a point in my life I was going through a really, really hard time. I remember laying down in my bed and saying to this angel out there somewhere, you know, if I just knew your name, I know I could figure out a way to communicate with you.
So at this point you've already kind of figured out, accepted that you have some special guide that you just want to call on that could give you some guidance.
Right. I mean, I just had this internal belief, this knowing that there were angels out there.
Okay, good.
But I couldn't figure out why, with learning all these other things, I couldn't communicate with angels, why that hadn't happened. So I said that thing. I just said, if I just knew your name, I know I'd figure out a way to talk to you if I just knew your name. Closed my eyes, and it was as though there was this total black screen, and the name Margaret started to spell out. I thought to myself, that's not an angel name. Margaret's it's a simple name. It can't be Margaret. And it started to spell itself out in every kind of font you could possibly see. I opened my eyes, thought to myself, okay, this is weird. Closed them again, and now it was kind of like a white screen, and again the name was coming up over and over and over. And at that point I figured, okay, I guess that's the name. I mean, I'm getting it clear enough. And what I started to do after that is, one of the techniques I had learned for spiritual communication was a thing called automatic writing. And you start a letter to someone that you're writing to as though it was your best friend in the world. And you could be asking for whatever advice you would, be asking. And then the really strange part about it, and this was the part I had a lot of trouble with when I first did this, is you start a letter back to yourself. Like in my case, Dear Jerry, and then just start to let it flow. Start to let a letter flow back to you and see what message you get back from what you've asked. So the first time I did it, I'm thinking to myself as I'm doing it, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, obviously, I'm asking the question, I'm writing the answer, I'm going to get everything that I want to hear. And it could not have been more opposite than that. I mean, I was writing a question about an issue I was going through in a relationship with somebody, and what came back to me was actually something that very kindly and gently and lovingly let me know it was completely my fault and my responsibility, and what things were happening that were causing it, and then a little bit of how the other person was thinking and feeling. But again, so lovingly and so kindly that it was the type of thing that when you finished reading it, you couldn't help but listen to the advice. And
wow.
That just started off something that I did for myself for a while. I only shared it with a couple of friends because most people would think you're definitely losing it at that point. And over a period of time, more people started to find out about it and ask me if I would write letters for them, which then grew bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where I started writing it for like hundreds of people a year.
So let's go back to that writing
Sure.
thing. So let's say somebody, is it specific questions or just generic guidance or that people ask you for?
It can be a combination of things. Most times when people will come to me, I ask them to come with specific questions, because it's not like a psychic reading in the sense that you're coming to me to find out what does my future hold and what's going to happen here or what's going to happen there. If you can picture the concept that you are actually opening up this ability to communicate with someone who understands the big picture,
Right.
Someone who can explain to you not, some vague concept of what the future would be, but what are the things that you could do to create the future that you're trying to create, who can explain to you why you're having difficulty with relationships, or what are the health issues that you're having and why. It's a very different thing from just, a traditional kind of a reading that somebody might do. So
Right.
people will come with questions, but very frequently Margaret will also go off on many times the deeper issue that brought them there that they might not be speaking about,
Right.
And so
So now, this is really quite extraordinary and fascinating. So now you're writing this, and then hundreds of people are writing to you, and you're just sitting and asking the question and kind of downloading.
exactly. Well, that's
And
a
then-
great way to describe it.
And then you pass on this information. But now you've got a book.
Right.
So it's Messages from Margaret. So now, what had you write the book?
Toward the end of, not last year, but the year before, towards December of that year, Margaret will very often, when I'm doing a message for someone else, or if there's something that I'm writing her about, she'll often just say something like, when you're finished with this message, could we talk later? Normally when that happens, I have a feeling something is coming up. The first time she asked that, she asked me if I could to create a workshop that would help people to learn how to communicate with their own angels. And that took place around 1995 or 96, and this whole workshop came to be. That was a mixture of shamanic knowledge and angelic knowledge, and it came to be called Angels and Shamans. And
Do you still do this workshop?
I still do, yeah.
Okay, that's great.
And it, still to this day, I have to say, when you come to the last part of it, the last exercise, and you come from that meditation, and I'll go around the room to see if people got the names of their angels or messages, I still get thrilled like a little kid every time that happens, because it's just such an exciting thing to know that happens.
I'm going to rattle off a couple of questions here, and then
Sure.
we'll get back to the
Right.
book. So does everybody have access to an angel?
Everybody does.
Many angels, or one specifically?
Depending upon your situation or what you're doing or what you're working with, there may be many angels that are working with you.
Okay.
There's definitely one specific angel, which we refer to as a guardian. What Margaret refers to in that process, and one of the first things in the book that she talks about, she busts 3 or 4 myths of things as we understand it. And one of the things she talks about when she discusses creation is she says that upon the big burst that took place at the time of creation, when the Creator allowed all things to take place, one of the first levels of creation was that of the angels. And then from the angels, working in conjunction with the Creator, all other things were created, including ourselves. So those angels that aided with the creation of everything then have a direct relationship with us. She says that relationship is a direct DNA tie-in, that DNA is not a physical thing, it's actually an energetic thing that ties you from the Creator through the angel to you. So that we have this very direct link, this energetic link with the angel that was part of what was involved in our creation process. And that is who we have come to call our guardian angels.
So, your angel kind of made herself known to you, and you were kind of asking, because if there is this link, it has to be purposeful in some way. There's a reason for it, I would imagine. Why would they not come and knock on your door and say, we want to talk to you and let you know we're here and you have access to us?
Because we are, and she describes this, I think, so brilliantly in the book, we are a level of creation that has something that no other level of creation had prior to us, which is free will. And we've certainly heard about that in so many different ways about what free will was, but what free will gave us the ability to do is to choose how we would experience life in different ways so that we could collectively grow as spirits, so that we can take different experiences, like we can take good experiences and we can take difficult experiences and bad experiences, like one from column A and one from column B. And she describes it like if you're making a cake, it will vary by how you just slightly change the recipe, and that's what we're able to do. Angels will in no way ever interfere with our free will. They won't come knocking on the door, but they will help us at any time that we actually will reach out to them and ask for help, because then that's part of our conscious process. If we're consciously asking for help, then we're making that decision. They're not making that decision.
I have to come back to that because my next question is, how are you different now?
Oh, I think in many ways. It's part of what I think it starts to do for you is it affects the way you look at life in general. That's not to say that I still don't have bad days or that I still won't have a temper about stuff, but the more you start to look at things from a bigger picture, the more I think you start to not focus on little things as much. It certainly opens up your mind to gratitude in so many different ways. I mean, the fact that this whole experience happened is something I'm really, really grateful for. But to know that you have that ability to write these letters for people and watch it change their lives, watch them come to you and they're just so shook up and so unsure about what they're doing with their life, and then they can walk out with a sense of purpose or a sense of understanding. That's immensely rewarding. I think it's made me a calmer person. I think I see there being a purpose to everything now that I didn't really understand before. I think everything and every experience that everyone has a much, much bigger purpose.
So I want to give you a chance to complete the answer to the question of the purpose of the book. So Margaret said...
She said that we were coming into the year 2012. And there had been so much that had been written about 2012, so much doom and gloom and, and worry, that she wanted to have something that could be written that would help people to understand exactly what the purpose of 2012 was, which wasn't a period of destruction. It wasn't a period of this horrible, world falling apart.
End of times.
End of times. What it was a time of awakening. It was a time of people actually becoming much more attuned to their spiritual self, but also becoming much more attuned to everyone else around the planet. And you said a really interesting thing, because you mentioned the word download before. Mm-hmm. And she does, one of the things that I think people love about speaking with her, and I do as well, is she uses these great analogies. She takes these most complex concepts and explains them so easily that you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But one of the things that she talks about is how, if we look at ourselves, she describes us as being so much more than this, so much more than you and I just sitting here, and so much more than what we think we are, which is you and I sitting here, and then beyond that, if we die, we become a soul that's in another place. She describes that this soul that we are, this energy that we are, is immense. And this immense energy allows itself or places itself into a number of different things at one time that may be happening at all different time frames across the spectrum, but part of our energy could be in a dog, or could be in a cat, or could be in another animal, could be in you, could be in me, could be in 1,000 other people all at the same time. And all of that energy feeds back to our spirit, just as it downloads information to us and we upload information to it. So she describes us as almost like applications. Mm-hmm. We're like the apps that are just always feeding information back. So the purpose of the book was to first of all help people to understand where we came from, to understand where we fit into the greater picture of things in terms of the concept of time and space and the future, and also to just not be so fearful, because what she described now is just having this pervasive energy of fear. Mm-hmm. And we see it in finances. We see it in, one person says, "Oh, we're in a bad economy," and then the economy slides. But
the sky is falling.
Right,
the sky is falling.
But we also see that through the technology that's out there now, that entire governments crumble because of just normal people who start a Twitter campaign. So what she said is that at this point in time, we actually have the technology for the first time in the world for everyone to be able to communicate with each other on the planet. So we're not just listening to what governments tell us anymore. We're not just listening to what religions tell us anymore. We're starting to relate to each other as people. So there has never been a better time than now for us to actually achieve peace and to achieve a worldwide harmony, because people are starting to take control of those things.
In a way, it's very empowering. It's an empowering message.
Extremely.
Because it's no longer, who am I to make change, or how can I impact? Mm-hmm. Everyone has the opportunity. And then I think what shows up for me is that not only does it empower people, but it connects people so that now you feel that you're not alone. That
exactly.
And that you can make a difference.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that she talks about is that not only can we make a difference by the things we do, we can make a difference purely by the way we think. And that is one of the most powerful things she talks about in the book. She talks about in the very beginning that the people who are reading the book are actually actively changing the world by the way you think, by the fact that you're actually taking on the concept to be doing this and moving your mind in a new direction. Because if we change the way we think, that starts this ball rolling that just energetically changes how other people think, and other people think, and
sure.
other people
Everything
think.
starts with a thought.
Everything starts, exactly. And she brings that right back to the beginning of creation, where everything started with a thought. And then, and continues through us, because we are the creators that keep things going.
Yeah, and that you kind of let that one slide, and that's a very powerful sentence. We are the creators that keep
Right.
things going. And most of us don't look at ourselves as the creators. Most of us look at life is happening and coming at us, and we're kind of, I don't want to overstate it, but victims of circumstance.
Right.
So it's really, all we have to do is like we're batting the ball, catch that one, as opposed to we are the originators, and how we think about it and then respond to it is what then creates the difference.
Exactly, and she does discuss that, and that's kind of a hard thing sometimes for people to grasp. And you asked me about me changing a little bit, and that's
Yes.
part of it as well. I think when you start to gather this message, you take on a great sense of responsibility for your own life, and you need to do that because we make all of our decisions. We make the decision to enter the relationship that may be a bad relationship. We make the decision to eat those things that might drive us to the point
All
of,
the time.
Sure. So when she talks about those things, first of all, she talks about it really kindly by saying the fact that you do these things and you're in these situations and problems merely speaks to your humanness, and that's a good thing because that's what you came here for. But what you didn't understand was that you did have control over this. And part of what she also describes that governments and organized religions have often done that wasn't to the greatest good to the people was to kind of keep that going on and for people not to realize that we were responsible for our own lives and that we had as much power as we do. She describes us energetically as these immensely powerful beings. One of the best analogies that she does is she says, there are those people who see the glass as half full, and we call those people the optimists, and those who see the glass as half empty, and we see them as the pessimists. But there is the worldwide community, which is the major community, who sees a glass of water not as half full or half empty, but wants to know is it tap or bottled.
Yes,
that
exactly.
just was so true because it's part of our humanness. It's part of where we are right now. And I just love that analogy because I think it's so true. And those are the people who have the most power at this point to decide what direction their life will go in.
Yeah, it can be a scary and daunting conversation to really have someone say, you've created this reality, and as a life coach, this is what I work with people, is this idea of whether it's true or not, it seems like the most daunting place to operate from, like, I created that, or
Right.
I'm the cause of this mess, or whatever. But if you it's really about choosing to own your life, own your choices, own the impact. And to me, then responsibility becomes almost like a gift, because it's operating from a totally different context. Like, I'm choosing to say that I am the creator of how I think and then what I cause out of that.
And also to realize that a lot of that is not the decisions you're consciously making, but it's the decisions that unconsciously are made by force of habit and
Yes.
by the ways of thinking. So she talks in the book about very easy ways to begin to change your thinking on a daily basis, ways to just very gently and easily change your thoughts. And then she talks about other ways that actually help to lift your vibration, to change energetically the frequency that you're at. Because when your body is vibrating at a higher frequency, you find you're not attracting those same experiences. Energy attracts. So we have the tendency to attract into our life whatever area we're vibrating at. So that if we're feeling great and we're feeling really wonderful, we have that tendency to attract more of those experiences to us. If you're rushed and you're trying to like drink your coffee and tie your shoes and do everything while you're driving to work because you don't leave enough time, there's a good chance you're going to have that fender bender because you're not in that same space. So.
Yeah, I'd like you to say a little bit more about the whole thing about operating at a different vibration, because that kind of sends people into a bit of a tizzy, because, it sounds a little esoteric.
Right.
And so how can we make it more real?
Best way I could describe it is, and I think everybody has gone through this particular experience, Do you know people in your life that when they walk in a room, they just fill up the room with energy? They're the people everybody loves to be with. They're the center of attention at a party. You know, they're they just radiate so much energy, and everybody wants to be around them. Okay, those are people who would be functioning at a really high vibration, and you can tell that because it's almost like they have this gravitational pull that you want to be there with them. You want to just go right there to them. There are other people in your life that you hear their phone on the voice, their voice on your message machine, and you're just like, oh, I don't want to call them back. They just, and you feel the life gets sucked out of you when you're talking to them. That it gives people a sense of what vibration is about.
Okay,
there's some just really real ways. So we experience energy all the time. We just don't think of it in that. We just think that it's that person is just, oh, I just hate talking to that person because they're such a downer.
Yeah.
But we feel tired. I mean, we literally get exhausted when we talk to them. That's someone who's just at a very low frequency because they're depressed or they're just constantly dealing with problems in their life. And the other person is happy and vibrant and joyful. And as I said, you just get sucked right into the pattern of wanting to be with that person, because what essentially they do, that person lifts your energy and the other person pulls your energy down.
Yeah, and I think the point I want to make here, because sometimes people hear that and then they say, it's like what immediately goes into somehow I'm failing because I'm not that person, you know, who draws everybody to me, and therefore I must be some kind of loser and I don't have access to doing that. And I think the point I like to make is that it really just requires attention.
Exactly.
That it's not about blame or fault or you're defective. It's just changing your mindset around it. And that you can actually start to intentionally raise your vibration by changing your thoughts.
Exactly. We don't learn that. I mean, no one teaches us from the time that we're young about the fact that we are creative beings. No one explains to us the fact that we can create our vibration and lift our vibration. We learn it when we're little. Usually when we're little, we're actually pretty good at it, because when you're little, all you want to be is happy.
Yes,
You know?
yes,
So you're
fully self-expressed.
Right, but it's actually when you're growing up and you start dealing with other things that it starts. But yeah, and again, one of the things she talks about in the book again is not feeling guilty about that, not beating yourself up for anywhere where you are, but just always being loving and gentle with yourself, and just trying to find these little ways to be able to lift it.
And on that note, we're actually out of time.
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah, didn't it? But it's a great note to end on, because the point is that it really shows possibility, and that starting this moment, things can change, and starting this moment, you can change things.
Right.
And removing the guilt and the fear and just looking at it as a creative process.
Exactly.
So I invite people to check out the book, Messages from Margaret. I invite people to check you out.
Thank you.
And contact you for all sorts of possibilities, including your workshops and angelic readings, yes?
Thank you. I would love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerry.
It was a pleasure.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.
Interesting. I was actually doing, a lot of times I'll do readings.